Folks are coming in now. And Mr. Mayor, you can get us started.
Good afternoon, everyone. No matter where you are around the country, we welcome you to the conference's Transportation and Communications Standing Committee. I now call the committee to order. I want to welcome all the committee members and thank them for being on time as we get ready to cover some extremely important business. I want to welcome all the other mayors and city staff, our business partners, and members of the media who are joining us as well, and certainly members of our Mayor's Business Council and other guests. We thank you for joining us in this important conversation. I want to send a special welcome to Tim Nguyen. He will serve as our parliamentarian. He's here to make sure we follow all the applicable rules in considering the resolutions that are before us. I am Michael Hancock, Mayor of the City and County of Denver, and I have the honor of serving as chair of this Transportation and Communications Committee. We'll have discussion later on here in this committee with members after we complete the very important discussion and passage or challenging of resolutions that are before the committee. We have 7 resolutions before us that were submitted in a timely fashion. Before I get started, I want to ask any of the committee members, are there other resolutions to be presented today? Mayor Hardy Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're bringing before you one resolution to ask for support for waivers of beyond visual line of sight rules for drone operations. I don't know if you want me to fully present now, if that's the appropriate thing for me to do, or just introduce the resolution and then we'll speak broadly about it later in our meeting.
Why don't you introduce it now and we'll come back and allow you to more broadly discuss the resolution.
Okay, fantastic. Again, it's a request for support. As we know, the FAA has established a rulemaking committee that will be focused on how they address the issues of aviation, particularly with unmanned aerial systems. And so this is a request of the FAA to move swiftly in providing waivers today for beyond visual line of sight operations of drones. That's the intent.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a resolution number, or is that assigned later on?
Mayor, that's assigned later on.
Davis?
That's assigned later on.
Okay, all right, we'll come back to it in just a moment. Members of the committee, we have 7 resolutions before us, and per the rules, we'll consider them as a group unless any member wants to call out a particular resolution. At this time, I will open the floor for any member who'd like to have any of these resolutions considered separately. We'll ask you just to raise your hand if you can push the button, or if you can't get that working, just raise your hand, I'll call on you. All right, seeing none, since there are no objections, the proposed resolutions contained in our resolution packet are approved. I'm gonna look at Tim Nguyen, make sure I didn't violate any rules there, but I recognize we have resolutions 85, 86, 87, number 43, number 88, 89, and 90 contained in that packet.
As long as there's no objection from any mayors on adopting them, then we're good.
Okay. All right, I see in here, I'll give one last chance for any objections.
Mr. Chairman, that also includes introducing the resolution that has yet to be numbered. Is that correct?
We're about to come right to it now.
Okay.
Mayor Davis. All right, then we'll have the record show that all the 7 previously submitted resolutions before this committee have been adopted. Thank you very much. Now we will turn to Mayor Hardy Davis's resolution to be presented before this committee. According to the rules, 2/3 vote without debate is required to allow a new resolution to be considered. Let me ask you right now if there's any opposition for the presentation before this committee, Mayor Hardy Davis's resolution. Okay, seeing none, the question is now on to the approval of the resolution being presented to us by Mayor Davis. Mayor Davis, would you like to speak further on the resolution at this time?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you to the members of the Transportation Committee. We believe this is not only important for us all across cities like ours, but there has continued to be a reliance on national electrical infrastructure. We know we're talking about infrastructure right now from a national perspective, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But all too often our reliance and the U.S. Conference of Mayors has played a significant role in ensuring that natural disaster risk reduction, as well as areas of science and technology, are included in our conversations. And utilities, they play a key role in being responsible for inspecting, protecting, as well as maintaining the critical infrastructure for the provisions of electric, gas, water, and even telecommunication systems. All too often what we see is that utilities are only able to use unmanned aerial systems in line of sight operations where there's someone who's physically able to see the drone or the unmanned aerial system. The FAA, again, has over the last several years worked diligently in establishing an aviation rulemaking committee that will be focused on developing a regulatory framework for beyond visual line of sight operations. But we don't have 2 to 3 years to wait. This is an opportunity for us through this resolution to urge and encourage the FAA to use its authority to approve beyond visual line of sight waivers during this interim period before there are final rules in place that facilitate BVLOS operations by utilities. And so the goal, once again, is to urge the FAA to begin accepting waivers for beyond visual line of sight operations for utilities. Most often, as I said earlier, most of those operations take place where there's a pilot who's able to see the aircraft without additional visual aids. If you look at what's happened most recently with Tropical Storm Henry, we see communities that already have been impacted. Utilities are using drones to see what the state of play is and gain situational awareness. And so once again, we're simply urging support for this resolution that we might move it forward and transmit to the FAA for waivers for beyond visual line of sight rules for drone operations in the interim while the rulemaking committee continues to do their good work.
And so, Mayor Dave, this is typically requested during the permit application phase for a drone, unmanned drone to go. Okay, for this waiver.
That's right. These waivers are typically requested during that period of time.
All right, let me ask the committee, are there any questions related to this this resolution? Mayor Whaler? You're muted, Mayor.
Just very, very briefly, I know this is geared towards utilities, Mayor Davis. Could we put some language in for municipalities too, and cities?
I'm not opposed to that at all.
I mean, because, you know, we all have emergency management operations and things like that. I just hate to, I want to allow the towns and cities to also have the flexibility, not just the utility companies, so.
That's a very good point. We would have to, as you all know, I'll just add, Mayor Whaler, to your potential amendment here that they're very, it's a very controversial issue in terms of unmanned aircraft, where they go, where they're permitted to go, who flies them, all that good stuff. And the reason why these rules are so tight. We would have to qualify, unlike your emergency management point, other reasons why a municipality would be granted a waiver. Do you have any other ideas on why a municipality may want to have a permit waiver?
Well, you have the Department of Public Works also. I mean, in engineering, you know, you're inspecting bridges, you're inspecting culverts. You know, there's whole different infrastructure municipalities have. I mean, I understand why the FAA has this rule. It's more geared towards a lot of times the, I guess, the hobbyist. And I agree with it. But, you know, when it comes to government services now, like, you know, we were just dealing, Mayor Bolich and I up our neck of the woods, along with some of the Northeast mayors, just a recent a hurricane tropical storm that just came through. And a lot of towns, in order to get a survey of the damage, where they can't have access to see how bad it is, they have to view it aerially. And a lot of times it's out of the visual sight of the person that's manning the drone, in order to allow OEM to find out where they have to send, say, a rescue boat to.
Right. It's a very good point. Let me just ask Tim, how we should handle this. Should we just take it as an amendment? Maybe
Yes,
certainly.
this would be an amendment. And unfortunately, because it's a new amendment, I don't have the language on my screen.
Yeah.
But what the committee needs to do is identify a place where either that word municipalities or for municipalities, or either a new paragraph or sentence can be inserted to achieve the intended effect of the mayor
Objective.
proposing the.
Yeah, Mayor Hart, is there a list of activities or waivers, exemptions that would be permitted under this resolution in the language?
Well, I think, and again, I'll also defer to good friend Kevin there, but I'm looking at the resolution as sent out last night to you guys. And in that section, in our third whereas clause, immediately underneath that, the third whereas clause says, whereas utilities are responsible for inspecting, protecting, and maintaining the critical infrastructure for the provision of those services, electric, gas, water, and telecommunications. And then it talks about the investment that utilities make. What I'm thinking is immediately after the fourth whereas clause, we could insert one that speaks to municipalities, and in particular, maybe say municipalities and their emergency management agents.
I think that would be great, Mayor Davis, because, you know, when you're in an emergency, you're pulling both public safety and public works and engineering into the fold during an emergency anyway.
Okay, you'll accept that as a friendly amendment, Mayor Davis?
Yeah, I would accept that with that language.
Okay, do we have a second to this amendment?
I'll second that, Mayor Hancock.
Well, you made it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. I want to do double.
Yeah, you're good, man. I like the way you think, though. Mayor Hovland, you have a question, or you second the amendment?
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, and is there?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, before we proceed, now would be the time to make sure we have the exact language so that members
on my
are
way
clear.
there.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Gotcha. Mayor Whaler, I'm going to ask you if you would, maybe, I don't know if it's Mayor Davis or Mayor Whaler can give us the language proposal.
I guess we should do the, after whatever the fourth paragraph is, and whereas cities and towns across the United States for public safety purposes and Office of Emergency Management have the availability to have the line of sight be waived for emergencies or normal operations or something along that line. You know, because then you would fold public works, police, fire, EMS, engineering into the fold, because they would be part of the fusion and pod anyway. In other words, when everything's all hands on deck. So
after telecommunications, or was it before? I want to make sure I understand that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to hear from Kevin, because in this resolution that's drafted, it's to the issue of utilities throughout. And so if we insert language that's specific to cities, towns, municipalities, with the key caveat being emergency management agencies, it needs to resonate and flow throughout as well.
yeah.
You'll have to have technical cleanup all the way through the resolution.
No, I agree. I agree with Mayor Carney.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, Mr. Nguyen, if that's something we need to handle right here. That is just a cleanup that would have to occur. It would just be as per the amendment as we insert this language, just to make sure it's tight.
Yeah, as long as the committee agrees on that conforming language should be inserted as well to make it consistent. As long as the committee's clear on that, then that can be done.
Okay, committee members, are we all clear with that? Can you just move a body bar your head so I understand? Let me turn to Kevin. Kevin, did you capture that language?
I did, and what I propose, Mayor, is I will work with you as chair and Mayor Hardy to make sure that it properly reflects that in the final version, and we'll get that draft looked at, and that's what we'll share with the committee afterwards, so they will be aware of what was adopted. I would just make this point. When I looked at the language originally as utilities, it had a private investor-owned utility kind of slant to it, but I also saw public utilities there in the resolution. So I think what we're seeking to do is clarify that we mean both private and public utilities, and also clarify their emergency services that are delivered by cities. And that's a kind of a unique function, Mayor Waller, that needs to be called out. So that's what we'll proceed with that assumption. And I'll work with Mayor Waller. I'll work with Mayor Waller and Mayor Davis to make sure the final version language reflects that.
Okay, and I like the phrase emergency management systems or
Yes.
response systems, which I think is critical to covering our bases there. We have a first and a second with that language at this point in time that will be further tightened up by Kevin and team, and we'll get it before we go before the full body members of the committee. I'm asking now, we have a first and a second. If there's additional discussion or debate at this time. Hearing none, I'm going to ask those who are in favor signify by saying or raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The resolution is adopted as amended. Anything else, Mayor Davis?
No, Mr. Chairman, again, I thank the committee and you, sir, for allowing me to introduce, present, and adopt.
Thank you very much. I want to just say to the committee members, I've been on this committee now for about 6-7 years. That has to be the easiest resolution process we've been through. There's always something going on with this committee. So I want to thank you all for supporting this process. Now we're going to shift with some issues before this committee, notably the infrastructure package that is now winding its way through the Congress. But before we do that, you may have heard that the Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas, who was vice chair of this committee for transit, has now been appointed by Mayor Whaley as the chairman of the Criminal and Social Justice Standing Committee. And so he's had to step down as vice chair of the Committee for Public Transit. And we want to thank Mayor Lucas for his leadership and certainly wish him well as he takes on this new leadership position within the conference. But we are pleased that Mayor Whaley has exercised great wisdom in appointing the Gresham Mayor, City of Gresham Mayor Travis Stovall, as our new vice chair of public transit. We want to welcome him to the committee today and at his first meeting. He brings a wealth of experience in transit issues, having served for some years in various capacities, leading the region's transit agency, TriMet, serving the Portland region. TriMet is recognized as one of the nation's premier public transit providers, and he joins us in this capacity as we work to navigate the many challenges and opportunities before us in rebuilding and redirecting our public transit services. Mayor Stovall, we want to welcome you again and ask if you have any brief remarks you want to share before the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair Mayor Hancock. Thank you. It is an honor to join this committee. You know, as Mayor Hancock just referenced, I've had the opportunity to be on the TriMet board for 9 years, only to have stepped down to take this role as the mayor of Gresham. And it is an honor to serve the city of Gresham in this capacity as we go forward. I just want to briefly, just briefly state the excitement that I have about the opportunities that we have within transit and transportation. And one of the reasons that I joined the TriMet board was primarily because of the intersection, pun intended, between equity, opportunity, climate, and environment opportunities that we have there, and spent 9 years working wholeheartedly in ensuring that we could move that forward and move those efforts forward. And from a regional perspective, as Chair Hancock has already referenced, we've had the opportunity to do some really amazing things over the last 9 years. One of the things that we did was deliver the largest contract in Oregon history to a minority contractor of about $80 million. And that's a first step to equity, and that we can replicate those types of things as we look to cause equity to happen across the country in the way that we process procurement and all of those things. So again, it is absolutely an honor to join this committee. I look forward to contributing in every way that I can and providing leadership in the transit space, because ultimately it really is one of the critical ways that we can impact change across the country, as we've had the opportunity and I've had the opportunity to do here locally. So thank you again.
Mayor Stovall, welcome again, and thank you for joining us. This is going to be a great, I think, experience in terms of this committee. There's a lot going on, particularly at this time in our country around public transit, and to have you as our lead, I think, is a real special opportunity. So thank you very much. Members of the committee, we're going to turn now to the infrastructure package that, again, is going through Congress right now. And I just want to make a couple of comments and thoughts as we think about it, and the House begins, or will, I think, in the next week or so, begin debate on this issue. First, I want to commend President Biden and his administration for making investment in infrastructure a top priority of his agenda. We have made some tremendous progress on some of the key priorities, including reconnecting America through improvement of our intercity rail systems, refocusing and expanding our public transit capacities, improving our highway infrastructure and bridges, and finally electrifying more of our transport systems. We will raise investment in these vital systems through the bill that's going forward while making progress on key climate protection. And many of us talked about that, and economic justice goals in this bill. And I think those are two of the main reasons why I'm very excited about this package. And notably, this package also helps to improve our airports and our ports, waterways, and broadband services. A lot of that large reach is done directly because of the input mayors had on this bill. It's an ambitious agenda, and we all agree it's largely very, very long overdue. And we have been challenged by our federal partners. We have challenged our federal partners, our House members, our senators, and the administration, and many of the calls and Zoom interactions we've had with them in getting these dollars more localized, especially highway resources, so that funds and funds allocated come directly to us, to our region, to our local areas. Many of you all may know that last month, Mayor Whaley and I joined several other mayors and about 3 or 4 governors in the White House to meet with President Biden and Vice President Harris. And we had a very direct, honest, candid conversation about the bill and the importance to localize a lot of these resources, but also the importance of this bill passing. At the end of the day, there will be this bill, when it passes, will mean it will be the result of historic involvement into our states, regions, and local areas. And the fact that mayors had historic lean in on these issues. It's going to help us advance important societal priorities and help us to wisely invest in our resources that can reshape our future prosperity for all of us. So for our part, we're going to remain engaged. We're going to continue to do everything we can to keep the House focused on getting this bill passed every Friday. I'm on a federal call, listening, learning, seeing where we are. We just simply can't allow caucus politics to get in the way of what is good and what's important to have, take care of all of us in terms of investing in our infrastructure. And so we want to just thank all of you for what you've done to help us lean in. We're not done by any means. We still have a lot of work to do, but we got to continue to stay on our House members to make sure that they complete the assignment of getting this bill passed and onto the desk of the president. So I'm going to now ask Mayor Hovland, our committee vice chair, and other committee members, if you'd like to comment or have any observations about where we are with regards to the infrastructure bill. Mayor Hovland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mayor Stovall, welcome. Nice to have you as part of the team. This is, I think, the largest standing committee for the USCM, and I think you'll really enjoy the group a great deal. I think when the Biden administration settled in to do its work, our leadership at the USCM, at both Tom Cochran and the staff level and the mayors, sort of instinctually knew that with this current administration, this was our chance to again create in our country an infrastructure system that was world leading. And we voiced that opinion as mayors. There were over 400 mayors in number in all 50 states that supported the bipartisan infrastructure framework. Mayors and the vast majority of people across America asked Congress to act, and now we've gotten it through the Senate, and we need to concentrate on the House, as our chair has just articulated. Our infrastructure system is not even in the top 10 globally anymore, where we used to lead the world in moving people and goods as quickly and efficiently as possible. We need to get back to that level. Years ago, there was a Brookings study that showed that 93% of the US economy was produced by the top 100 metropolitan regions in the country. I think the census has reinforced that notion that people are moving into these metropolitan areas, and 85% of our population is now in urban areas. In my own region of Minneapolis-St. Paul, we probably have one of the most dominant metroplexes in the country because it represents about 74% of our state GDP. In these top 100 regions throughout the rest of the country too, transportation is a key part of life. How we move people and goods is critical. Effectiveness and efficiencies, as I mentioned earlier, translates into dollars gained or lost, and our people in our country prosper accordingly. Now here we are trying to work our way out of a pandemic, and we are all experiencing new things with respect to transportation infrastructure. And I think there are other experiences yet to be had. Above all else, with this change that we experience, I think one of the things that this conference has held dear to its heart is that the opportunities that get created by rebuilding our transportation infrastructure system ensure equal access to the post-pandemic economy by everybody. That the recovery must mean that there be a shared prosperity by every person in every home. In the resurgent economy that we know is happening now, and we believe will become even stronger over time, we cannot afford to leave anyone behind. It must mean that all hands have to be on deck. And if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that we don't just concentrate on the most prosperous parts of our regions. Because what happens over time is that transportation improvements tend to track congestion. Congestion tracks prosperity. And what happens then is that some places get left behind. It can be unintentional, but it will happen. And we've seen that in our own region here, where not only do neighborhoods in some parts of the region get left behind inadvertently, but we've in the past had situations where we've purposely cut interstate highway systems through African-American neighborhoods that have been really prosperous. And it has had a profoundly negative effect in what we call the Rondo neighborhood of St. Paul. This is something that we need to work on regionally, but it is also something that some of the monies from the federal bill will really help with. What I'm really bothered by is the fact that the bill that made it through the Senate took $20 billion and turned it into $1 billion for this restorative sort of infrastructure. So I think when the chair talks about needing to reach out to our people in Congress to give them some guidance on what's required to satisfy constituents in our own states, let's not forget about this restorative aspect of our infrastructure. Let's leave nobody behind. Let's make sure that this rising economic tide lifts all boats. And so make sure that you encourage your congressmen to restore, and congressmen and women to restore that amount of money that was originally in the framework around restorative infrastructure. Mr. Chair, that's my comments with respect to that particular aspect of the bill. Thanks for your time.
Well said, Mayor
Thanks to
Hovland.
the members of the committee.
Thank you, Mayor Hovland. Well said. Let me ask members of the committee, are there any other comments or thoughts? Okay, let me just say this as we prepare to close. We don't know how this is going to, of course, end up in the House. Obviously, we hope that we have the full bill as it's moving through, come through the way we hoped it would. And I think Mayor Hovland pointed out we can't take anything for granted. So we got to stay in communication with our members of the House. Please look for our notices from me, Tom Cochran, Mayor Whaley, as we try to keep people up to date and maybe call to action as the House begins to really work on this massive investment package and move it forward. So we'll need to make sure that we're all ready to act, have our teams help support us and get that through. Let me ask one quick question. I don't know if Tom Cochran is still on the line, but maybe Kevin McCarty, you can answer this question. When Mayor Hardy presented his resolution, he referenced, of course, the rulemaking body in Washington as part of these unmanned aircraft systems in the FAA. There used to be at least Secretary Anthony Fox, former Secretary Anthony Fox of DOT, was very intentional in making sure a mayor was represented on that rulemaking committee. Do we know if a current mayor is sitting on that rulemaking committee? No?
Mayor, I'll defer to Mayor Hardy. I don't believe we have anyone there. And if I can just say, to comment on the drone issue particularly, I've worked on that over the years, and I would make this observation. It is really dominated a lot by technologists and people who are trying to create a whole new kind of aerial economy, so to speak. And our issues, quite frankly, are not heard as well as they should. And the FAA has a bias in terms of how they operate. They think that their day job revolves around whatever a new aviation opportunity can allow should be facilitated. And sometimes they view us as, much like we do in the surface transportation space, we want crosswalks that are safer. That sometimes slows vehicular traffic or makes it, harder for people to drive the way they want to. We've got some of the same issues in the drone space where our concerns are not necessarily the same as the technologists in all cases.
Yeah,
And
that's,
they've not geared them, the FAA, Mayor, you've spent time on their major committee for years.
yeah.
You know that the FAA has this, as they say, bias, if I can say it that way. They just don't quite get us, if I
No,
can.
you're absolutely right. And that's why I asked the question, because when I was on the management committee of FAA, the administrator at the time asked me for a recommendation. We appointed Mayor Lee, from the late Mayor Lee of San Francisco. And I'm not sure I heard, or I lost track on after he was there, and unfortunately we lost him. No one else went on to the committee that I'm aware of, and he really enjoyed it. And he brought that local perspective. So Mayor Davis, are you familiar with any of the operations?
Yeah, I concur with everything that's been said, both Kevin and yourself, Mr. Chairman. We don't have representation there, and there has historically been a bias.
Okay.
This is something that I've worked on here in Augusta, but also in the state of Georgia for several years now, up to and including establishing the first model drone ordinance for municipalities back in 2015, working in partnership with Augusta National Golf Club because of some of the things that were going on out there at that operation. So we definitely could use a voice on that rulemaking body to help move our issues forward that, again, are important, not just from a technology standpoint, but I think Mayor Whalen said it best. When you look at some of the public safety, emergency management types of issues, we're on the front lines of that.
Absolutely. Well, I think we at least have our volunteer to go on the committee. Now we just got to pave the way. So I will be happy, Mayor Davis and Kevin, to have a conversation with the secretary, and maybe he can lead us to the FAA administrator and find the pathway to get some mayoral representation on that committee. I will work on that. All right, members of the committee, I want to note that we will be scheduling some committee sessions for this fall. Please be on the lookout for many emails from Kevin McCarty at the conference staff. You see his lovely face here online. He'll be forwarding my request for a committee to come together, and we may at times hastily have to come together, particularly as things develop in Washington, and we need to lean in on that. If there's no other business before this committee, any final comments or thoughts? Then we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all for your time. Have a great remainder of your week. Thanks, Kevin.